Great to see everyone's names and where you're checking in from. Please take a look in the chat. We can see, so we're definitely have our Great Lakes representation. I'm thrilled to have friends from Rochester. It's also wonderful to see that people are here because they had an opportunity to use the Rabbi program last year. I also want to give a big thank you to our Cleveland educators who are here on this call. You're going to be really excited to meet them and then get to know them over the course of the year, hopefully. We'll be doing some more work on this project. Excellent. Lauren, I like your multiple identities. I live in Cleveland, work in Akron. It's like superhero.
Well, it feels important-ish. I don't know.
It's definitely important-ish. Totally. No question. We all have multiple identities and ways that we identify ourselves. It's also really powerful to see all the different ways of how we look at curriculum so differently and trying to help our students figure out and create the world that they wish to live in, looking for new challenges. Eileen, thank you for always being eager to try new things. It's really helpful. Cookie, yeah, it's really exciting to be able to share those different ideas with our families and our approaches. Developing a way to be co-creators of the learning. Thank you, Susan. I'm so excited to see all this positive feedback about Rabbi. Who needed that whole huge survey? We did, actually. It was very helpful. Wonderful. So please keep putting the information in. We're thrilled to have you here, and we hope that you will not be shy. Along the way, after each section, we're going to give you an opportunity to ask some questions about the different things that we're doing. So first, want to thank everyone again for being here. We're excited to share a little bit about what's going to be happening this year and also some context of how we created and developed this approach. And of course, I have to, with the opening remarks, I have to say something about Nechama Moskowitz, who really put her heart and soul into this effort and really has been such an inspiration, not just for us here in Cleveland, but through the whole country for a number of years. She is like riding off into the sunset on her retirement, still working on some Hebrew initiatives. So you'll still hear from her from time to time, but grateful for all the work she's done to set us up for success in the coming year. I mentioned before a little teasingly about Rabbi, and one of the things that we did is have a huge evaluation process that was beautifully led by Rosov Consulting. And in it, we figured out some really key takeaway elements that we want to hold on to, that we want to keep challenging ourselves to play with and to consider going forward in the future. And those key things are really focusing in on what children need. And we also want to be able to understand a little bit more about the changing relationships of the adults who support them, and test ourselves, challenge ourselves, push ourselves a little bit more to define what that looks like, who we are and who we want to be as those adults who are in relationships with our students. And the same could be said with our teachers. And a key thing that came out of the survey data, which really in a lot of ways reinforces what we know is the importance of relationships. And that was a huge piece that was very challenging last year, especially because we couldn't be together in person. And we know how much it means to be able to be together and to have those interactions and to create sacred community together. So we want to keep those elements and those pieces in the forefront of our mind. So I just want to give you that little taste initially before I dive into showing you the slides and the different information we have, just to give you a little taste of it. So those are going to be like the three huge things that we're focusing on: the children's need, the changing role, and learning in the context of relationships. And of course, we did like three things from that. There's going to be a lot of threes. Just go with it. You're going to love three. It'll be your favorite number too. We wanted to create for the curriculum, this is a second part of the three, is to really capitalize on this moment, really to reframe the role of adults and children. And we previously had a presentation that Nechama led on the gifting framework, which is much more focused on the ideas, the ideology, how we're thinking about teaching and helping our students to develop their sense of believing, becoming, and belonging. We have the 3+3 project, which has the curricular materials, and then the last leg of this component will be the professional development support materials. So we'll mention that more at the end. So our goal for today is really to provide support for you, our directors, ask really big questions, and invite you to start playing around in your mind and considering how you might utilize these resources when you're doing your staff trainings. Okay, before I dive into the next piece, do we have any questions? All right, we're gonna go for it. So the 3+3 project is focused on two main texts. And so we want to have an opportunity as educators to really dive in and immerse ourselves into these pieces. So the very first one is Pirkei Avot 4:13. Rabbi Shimon says that there are three crowns: the crowns of Torah, the crown of priesthood, and the crown of royalty. But the crown of a good name surpasses them all. So this is a text and a piece that many of us are familiar with from Pirkei Avot. We've heard from time to time. We know Susan had said, like, yes, she has children. 3 is a great number. Like we use threes a lot. There's something that draws us into these texts. So the first piece, certainly for me, is this idea of a crown. That oftentimes we'll think about, what is it that we are striving towards? What is it that we want to be? Who do we want to be? I guess the times I've worn crowns most, probably Purim, these times where you get to dress up and become somebody else. So I sort of imagine having the opportunity to try on different crowns. So if you think of the categories for these different things, crown of Torah, when we think about Torah, you could consider people who study, immerse themselves in learning. The priesthood, perhaps it would be the descendants of Aaron, the priest. And we may even be able to consider this more as the ritual side of Judaism and how we immerse in our history. And the crown of royalty, well, that becomes the kings. It could also be queens, I suppose. When we think about the royalty, I think of it in terms of our rules, our law, our society, and how it's developed and created. So there's this interplay between these three elements: that ability and drive to learn, people who are chosen and selected towards a religious purpose, and those who are really invited, anointed to be able to lead, or I guess elected, to lead and to develop our society. One of the things when we look at all of these crowns, Rashi actually points out that only one of them is in our control. that we are able to achieve, and that is the crown of Torah. And as educators, all of us have an opportunity to achieve this, to strive, to become even stronger, to reframe, to redesign the crown that we are going to wear. But if we look at the last line, the crown of a good name surpasses them all, we realize that in essence, these crowns, sure, they serve some purpose, but if you do not have a good name, if while you're wearing the crown of Torah, you are so learned and knowledgeable and understanding of the traditions, but you don't actually live them out or adhere to them, or don't treat people with the same level of respect and authority, it diminishes the crown. And that's the case with all three of these crowns. So we learn from this that our behavior and our ability to reach all these different elements and components becomes that much more important. And so when we think about our work as educators, there was a comment earlier about trying to help our students to navigate the world, to help our families explore these different ideas and concepts. What if there was a way that we could develop and create the learning that would allow us to elevate our behavior and our levels of participation that would make us proud of the crown that we earned, that goes beyond what our jobs, goes beyond what our responsibilities, but goes to who we are and how we exist within this world and in this context. So it's interesting, while I was reading a number of commentaries on this Pirkei Avot, there's a new one, Pirkei Avot Social Justice Commentary. Do I have this one? I think I have it sitting out on my desk. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this one. This is by Rabbi Dr. Shmuley Yankowitz, and he actually uses our second text as the commentary on the Pirkei Avot. A person is known by three names: one that their parents call them, one that other people call them, and one that they earn for themselves. And the best of all is the name that they earn for themselves. So again, we get into this notion about the priority of the name that we earn for ourselves being the highest level that we can achieve. And I was also thinking about this in terms of the work that we do and how we were working as educators, not just last year, but in a whole variety of contexts. There are certain names and labels and things that people will share with us, how they will refer to us, and then also ones that we are able to acquire on our own. So imagine how we could consider these two texts together. Imagine how we could take this idea and this thinking of elevating ourselves when we're working with our faculty. And at the end of the project, what would the name be that we would be able to earn for ourselves over time? Would it be based on our job and our work? Would it be based on how we lead tefillah? Would it be based on how we create community? What would be the ways that we can earn a special, unique name for ourselves, and thereby also doing the same for our faculty, for our students, for our families? So I invite you to think about these two texts, really this is a intellectual, spiritual, and also managerial kind of a question, sort of going back to the first Pirkei Avot, right? So it has to do with the priests, the kingship, and then also from the perspective of Torah. So I'd like you to consider how you could teach and share these texts with your faculty. And we had a lot of debates when we were putting the materials together, whether or not the text study would be better received when you do it with your faculty, if you teach it on an adult level, or you do a sampler or test it out in terms of teaching it on the level of how you would utilize with the students, or could you come up with some other models as well? So I invite you to think about, this is, just jot down notes for yourself, some personal reflection about how you could take this and utilize it and move it.
Stacy, one question did come in about the first text, about a question from Randy. Isn't the crown of a good name in our control?
Exactly. So, and there's even a correlation, one commentary that I had read, it actually said the two things that are within our control is the Torah, the Ketzer Torah, how much you study, you learn, and you continue to foster the intellectual strength and abilities, and the power of a good name. That is in our control. And the other two pieces are given. So it's actually the beginning, the Torah, and then the name that are kind of holding the other two components in the middle. So thank you. Yeah, that was a great question. There any other questions? You think of something?
Can I make a comment? It's
Please.
Okay, I was going to say this. I was very, very inspired when I read this and heard this. I was thinking about that. I think it's Maya Angelou who said, "It's not what you teach, is not what you remember. The content the kids remember. Ultimately, it's how you make them feel." And I think that's where the crown of a good name comes into it. It's how your students, your faculty, and your families feel as a response to your leadership.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yes, I was thinking of that quote myself as well. Really beautiful. Any other comments?
I'm trying to type out how to word it, but I'm thinking the whole concept of names, it would be interesting to include like teasing or people who make fun of your name. And also how the society is changing now with like people who are non-binary or want to change their names and want to be called something else, or the pronouns. It'd be very interesting to figure out how to tie that into it.
Excellent. Thank you. It's a great point. Susan, that's a great way to think about this, to consider ways that we could explore the synagogue's educational program, vision, mission, values, and those types of things by how we want to be remembered as teachers and the culture of the program. Sounds like an amazing idea. Thank you. All right, so keep thinking about these different ideas and consider how we can do it.
Yeah, also there's a book about like how your parents gave you your name, like the I don't know, your special name or why you're given this. I forget what the name of the kid's book is, but it's like everyone has this name for a reason, and all that to go into that.
Yeah, there's a beautiful, I think I remember what you're I can't remember the name either, but
your first gift, your very first.
That might be it.
Something like that.
But it goes through and it gives you an opportunity, like ask questions, talk to family, find out different ideas about the name, what it means, where it came from, and those sort of things. That's a great way to think of it. So keep writing down these ideas and thinking about them for yourselves. And Debbie, I'm gonna turn this over to you.
Okay, great. I'm intrigued and I'm looking for this book, The First Gift. I'll see what I can find and hopefully.
Okay, good, thanks.
So I want to talk a little bit about how the curriculum was created and what is unique and different about both the, in particular about the role of adults in bringing these learning materials to our learners. Hopefully some of you had a chance to look at the materials in advance. We asked you to look just a little bit at the curriculum and a little bit at lesson 3 from the curriculum. Hopefully some of you have seen the gifting framework, which came out of our work, the team from the JEC in terms of really a new way of thinking about Jewish education and Jewish learning. And perhaps even some of you participated in the webinar that we did on the gifting framework, but there are lots of pieces that are being brought together here. And what I want to talk about is first a little bit about the design of this curriculum. So if you've had a chance to look at it, perhaps you recognize that, that the curriculum materials were created using understanding by design, which is an approach that starts with an enduring understanding, which really is a big idea that lies at the heart of all of the learning. An enduring understanding is something that requires uncoverage, something that our learners discover through inquiry, through discovery, through hands-on learning and explorations, and they uncover it from a variety of different perspectives. And in our project, also in this 3+3 project, the learning ends with an opportunity for each learner to apply their learning in a way that is personally meaningful, that is deep and rich and shows their understanding, how they have taken in the enduring understanding and the big idea. And so here is our enduring understanding for the 3+3 project. How we live our lives defines the name we earn for ourselves and influences others whom our lives touch. So as Stacy said, the curriculum is also really built around these 2 core texts that she shared as well. And what we really want to talk about is the role of the teacher in sort of managing the multiple ideas about this curriculum, both the big idea, the enduring understanding, these 2 central texts, and a little bit about the gifting framework, which really is a new way for everyone in our learning settings to think about Jewish learning. So for teachers who are new to using understanding by design, this idea of an enduring understanding might be a little bit new and different. But we really want our learners, all of our learners, to be familiar with the enduring understanding, with the idea, with this big idea that they are exploring and grappling with throughout all of their learning in this unit. So, and so as you look through the curriculum, or perhaps even as you began looking through it already, but as you get more deeply into it, you can see how the activities are tied to the enduring understanding. You can see where there is by design uncoverage opportunities for each of the learners. But I really want to talk a little bit about what it means to sort of have the enduring understanding at the forefront. And we're talking about in using this curriculum, the idea of weaving in these multiple strands. Again, 3 is a big number for us. So this idea of the enduring understanding of the text and of the gifting framework. So it is possible with a scripted curriculum as this one is for the teacher, for the adult in the classroom, and we're going to start referring to those adults as learning guides. And again, if you looked at the If Not Now When materials or websites, again, hopefully you're seeing the different ways that we're thinking about the roles of adults and children in the learning setting. But it is possible to sort of deliver a curriculum like this without the teacher owning it and without the teacher really thinking about how it is falling on the learners. And that there's a certain kind of intentionality that is required when it comes to really weaving in these pieces. And so part of why we are talking today about what it means to be thinking about how to bring these materials to your teachers and to your faculty is because this curriculum asks them really to behave in a different way and to lead both in the front and alongside in a different way. So if you had a chance to read through the curriculum, perhaps you noticed that in the three what do you call those columns that are set up for the curriculum, the ways that things are intentionally woven together, the way that things are connected in the writing of the curriculum. But the job of the teacher will be to, the job of the teacher or the teacher leader, the learning guide, will be to really think about how they are managing these three pieces and how they are aware of how learners are taking in both the opportunity to explore and grapple with the big idea of the enduring understanding, the personal opportunity to dig deeply with those two core texts, and how they are starting to receive some of the gifts of the gifting framework as well. So it's a lot for teachers to manage and a new way of thinking. One of the things that Nechama said to Stacy and I in terms of how to think about how to do this is that it's not a juggling act and it's not a constant balancing act. It's not that the teacher has to constantly have the three different balls up in the air, but that at different times, different pieces take precedent, and then we're focusing perhaps on the text, perhaps on the enduring understanding, perhaps on raising up pieces of the gifting framework as well. So if you had a chance to look at lesson 3, we want to show you what we found when looking at lesson 3 in terms of how to think about how these three pieces are raised up in the written document as it's written, and to ask you to think a little bit about how this will require a new kind of leadership for your teachers and the learning guides in your classrooms. So you can see that the enduring understanding with the introduction of the second text, which happens in lesson 3, that the idea of earned names is crucial to the introduction of that text, so that the texts themselves are very much tied to the enduring understanding as well. And at the end of the activities, this notion of the big idea is introduced. One thing that I always like to have my teachers do if they're using an understanding by design curriculum with an enduring understanding is to put that enduring understanding somewhere very central for learners to be able to see, regularly reference, and regularly refer to. And if you look through all of lesson 3, you can see that there are a couple of extension activities that can expand the learning for session 3. And those specifically really focus on the big idea of earned names, which is core to the enduring understanding. In terms of the gifting framework, the stories of the core activity focus on this notion from the gifting framework of the richness and wisdom of Jewish tradition, and so central to the idea of earned names and of the importance of names is this piece of the gifting framework about the uniqueness, value, and blessing of each individual. And that's something that we want to be raised up in many ways. It's very much tied to the text and very much tied to the enduring understanding as well, but it is central to the gifting framework. In extension activity number 2, which again are additional pieces of the session, you can see again that there is more focus on the uniqueness of each individual. And I think this is the place where what it means, names are not just your given name, but names are about what you do, how you interact with others, who you want to be. And so in terms of identity formation and the kinds of things, Randy, that you were talking about, there are a lot of ways to really, when thinking about the gifting framework, both share, gift, and highlight for our learners this notion of the uniqueness, value, and blessing of each individual. The texts are very conscientiously woven into this lesson, specifically the second text, and you can see that the resource sheet is connected to that, but the introduction of this text, but also weaving together and asking the question at the end about why learners think that the name of this curriculum is a 3+3 project, and drawing the connection between the two texts and the idea of 3 crowns and 3 names. And so that's the places where we saw these three pieces woven in, and we want to highlight for you the intentionality of how they're woven in and the necessity of intentionality by your faculty in terms of weaving that in as well. I am curious about both your response to this little chart here in the slides, and also in terms of what you saw if you had a chance to look at session 3. So how did you notice the weaving? How and where?
I have a more basic question, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
So in the curriculum and looking over session 3, it refers to a resource sheet. And I'm curious where that is in the curriculum. Is it in this original curriculum, or is it at the end after the lesson? I didn't find it easily.
So I believe, Stacy, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the resources are a separate file. I don't know that they have been listed.
Thank you. Got it. Okay. So
Yeah,
that's why I
yeah.
couldn't find it.
Oh, Eileen put it there. You can see. Thank you, Eileen. If you
It lists
explore
all the
website,
files separately.
it does.
Okay.
On that same note, like, is there any way to hyperlink the resource sheets like into the guide? Because
A lot.
it was a lot to manage. So that was
Yeah.
just like a little aside.
Sure.
So that's a structural design element that I feel also. Stacy, that's for you.
I think it is.
Yeah, yeah.
Great, good.
So I want you all also to really think about, in terms of doing this threading, what do you think, weaving, what do you think will be challenging for your teachers and faculty in terms of thinking about teaching in this way? Sorry, my keyboard's really loud. I guess an important question is, Susan, you can just comment in the text. No worries. We don't mind barking dogs or crying babies. I guess an important question is whether or not this actually is a new way of teaching and leading for your faculty or not. And if it is new and different, what changes does it require on your part in terms of the supports that will be necessary for your faculty to be successful?
A real simple question there.
Yeah, of course.
I guess I love reading curriculum. Like, I love figuring it out. And with this, I was kind of challenged, and I kept having to go here and there and kind of get the big picture. So I feel like if we're going to use this with the training, it's going to really need to be scaffolded really well, and doing a lot of it together, and us kind of demonstrating and using it with teachers before we ask teachers to utilize it by themselves. I happen to have a group of teachers who don't necessarily have, education degrees and intense motivation to kind of master it at the level I feel like we really need to master it to implement it.
Yeah, thank you. I think that there is a denseness to this material, which is a very good thing for our learners, but also perhaps a new and different kind of challenge for our faculty. One of the things that Stacy is going to be posting after today's webinar is Another dense document for you to go through of recommended professional development ideas and suggestions. And just so you know, Eileen, those of us on the development team really, really agree with you. We think that part of the learning for faculty in terms of understanding how to bring this material to learners is to really experience it as learners themselves, and not just thinking about how to pick it up and bring it, but really to have the experience of doing a variety of the lessons, sessions, and activities, and then reflecting and thinking about, depending on what age of learners they'll have in their group, how to best bring that effectively. And there are some ideas and some scaffolding pieces in that resource that Stacy's going to post later.
Last year when we did Labriut, I thought the scripted lessons would be enormously helpful. You talk about scaffolding, and quite a few of my teachers preferred not to have the pressure of a script, which is interesting. So, you know, I'm hoping that with this three-pronged approach that we can create room for teachers to use whatever speaks to their style of teaching. I'm really hoping.
Yeah, I think you will be able to. You will find that this is much less scripted, but still very rich in terms of materials that the teachers can bring to their learners. And there's I think a greater level of agency in terms of the role of teachers than perhaps in the Labriut curriculum.
Right, and I've had teachers work with the curriculum several ways. I have one teacher who's just loves to highlight, and she also loved to personalize. So she would go through and highlight the different elements she wanted and then could work right off of the script. And I had another teacher who would prefer to rewrite it into her own words and in her own way, which was just an organization. I mean, I wish everyone would do that, but it was really a great way for her to personalize it, wrap her head around it, think about ways that she could utilize it. So, and I think having the script then makes it easier to work off the script because everything's there and you can take it and add it in. But also, like Debbie said, it's a little more, there's a little more room for agency.
Just Susan, in response to your comment about the connection activities at the beginning of each session, there are several resources in the resource packet for the resources for session 1 that offer a variety of these kinds of connection activities. I think that those can, I think you can repeat them throughout the year, throughout the times together. The thing that I am telling my faculty is they just need to take a moment of connection at the beginning of each class where everyone has an opportunity to share something about themselves. It's a constant reminder that if our kids leave their classrooms not knowing each other's names, then we failed. And so some of the activities are really in the beginning about getting to know names. And then I think it's just simple questions about how was your week? How did you celebrate Passover? Just a very simple connection question. And I think I'm probably gonna brainstorm a list of them for my faculty. That's kind of thing that we can be sharing in Facebook. And the opportunity just for everyone to be able to share a little bit about themselves each week. Oh, so yeah, especially if you have the responsive classroom material stuff, Susan, if there are things that you're pulling together, if you would share those on Facebook as well, that would be awesome. Okay, great.
Excellent. All right, well.
Oh, we do have, as Stacy said, at the end of each section, we have like a couple of questions to consider. So there's just one more slide that sort of closes this section, but also Stacy will post a whole series of questions to consider for you to think about as you're considering whether, when, and how to bring this material to your schools. So what additional information or supports might your faculty need? And then this piece that was referenced just briefly, what are the places in your school to reinforce the enduring understanding and keep the cortex in front of learners and their families? So we're kind of thinking about, are there places in the hallway? Is it at the top of the weekly newsletter each week? But we want the text and the enduring understanding to be something, for us, I really want it to be something that our learners are seeing all the time. I want it to be something that our families are seeing regularly as well. So I'm starting to think about the physical space issues as well.
Thanks, Debbie. Okay. Next piece we're going to dive into is really thinking about our teachers differently. And as Debbie had said earlier, we've started calling them learning guides. And part of the reason to utilize this language is so that we actually think differently about the roles and the kinds of things that a learning guide would do. So there's 4 main principles that go into being a learning guide that we think would really help the faculty to focus on: inspire curiosity, facilitate connections, practice tzimtzum, and to deepen Jewish learning. So for inspiring curiosity, we as teachers really invite our students, our children who are in our rooms, trying not to say students, it's tricky, to become engaged and empowered learners when they are encouraged to wonder and to ask and to pursue avenues of interest. Saying things like, that's a really great question, or that makes me think about, or I wonder, or how could you find a way to answer that? So it's constantly like asking questions that tap into that piece of curiosity for the learners. Another big piece is to facilitate connections. Sometimes that can be the most powerful tool that we can use in the classrooms. And that really helps us to make one another feel like we belong. And not only that, but there are the connections together. In addition to doing things to help to make people feel comfortable in the room, the way that you go about structuring the learning activities can do that as well, where the learners start to feel, I could, for example, I know that Debbie's really great at X. So if I have a question on that, I'm going to want to go ask her about it because I know that's something that she's wonderful at. So constantly trying to facilitate different connections between the learners in the room. And so part of that, the curriculum itself has little clues and little questions, or kind of gives you as a facilitator some ideas of things to think of. And really to do, as you're creating these connections, to keep them focused on what it is that the children need. So it's easier to foster the relationships and those connections if we are tapped into that concept. The third piece is to practice tzimtzum. And a number of us know the Kabbalistic notion and the story of tzimtzum and how the world was created. I think someone's unmuted. So there's this great story of how that comes from Lurianic Kabbalah, of how the world is created. And first, God is everywhere, but then God contracts and spreads out into all these containers or vessels. And so in doing that, leaves space for the rest of creation to fill the world. And so we are considering this story and this concept for us as teachers. It's really, really hard to do because there are certain ways that we have been trained or we have been taught. Almost all of my family our teachers in some way, shape, or form. It's always really hard to have a conversation because we're all always in charge of like leading and guiding conversations. So to really take this idea to heart, and what would it look like and feel like to create this space for the learners and their questions, and to let that drive the learnings that's happening within the context of our experiences. And also to really deepen the Jewish learning. One of the things that I really appreciate about the structure of this curriculum is that I think there is room to not only use this as one curricular unit, but to think about how it could connect in to other ideas and concepts that you're teaching already. If there are sacred texts that you are working with, if there are different Jewish values that you are working with, the different approaches and techniques could fit in and align, and some of these units could be broken out and separated and applied there as well. And constantly keeping our focus on the Jewish learning component that helps to explore the bigger ideas that exist within our tradition and within Jewish life, so that there is this idea that Judaism has gifts for us. And part of our learning process is to uncover or discover these different gifts. Okay, there any questions?
Okay, we're going to give you a little bit of time to play with these ideas, with these principles, and we're going to break you into some small groups. You can see that I just put 2 links into the chat. It would be really helpful, because Stacy and I had some trouble with this earlier today, if people can click on those links just to let us know that you can get in. One is a short vignette, a short teaching vignette based on session 3. And then one is a little chart that I think Stacy gave you a quick preview of, but we'll show you. Yes, Rabbi Prass, you were able to get in? Excellent. Yes, Rabbi Szymanski, great, lots of thumbs up, excellent, excellent, good. So hopefully at least one person in each group will be able to get in. So your task when you get into your small group is to very quickly introduce yourself to each other. We don't want to go completely against the principles of this curriculum. To read the vignette either aloud or everyone read on their own. And then you're going to look at the chart. So Stacy, if you could just show the chart. And we're going to ask you just to talk about in the vignette where you saw each of the 4 principles, and to think about other ideas for bringing the principles of learning guides into this particular session, or even thinking about other sessions. So when we break you into your groups, please take note of which group you're in, because in that the second document, we're going to ask you to fill it out. You'll fill it out based on whatever group you're in. So you're going to read the vignette, and then you're going to just talk about where you find each of these 4 principles. Okay. If Stacy and I will probably bounce in and out of groups. If you need anything, you can always call for help, and one of us can come in to your group. Oh, you got the 4 principles. Let me just quickly make sure that these come up as different. So the first link, Susan, is the one to the vignette, and the second link is the one to the 4 principles charts. Hopefully that's what everybody found. When I clicked on them, they did work, so that's good news. Okay, I think we're going to give you about 15 minutes in groups, right, Stacy?
Yes.
All right, and if you have any questions once you get into your group, just let us know.
All right, have fun.
So So everybody should have gotten an invitation from Stacy. If you just accept that invitation, it'll send you to a group. Everybody, Esther said maybe it wasn't enough time. How was it for everybody?
There's never enough time.
That's the truth, and we should know that as Jewish educators, right, Randy? Yes. Okay, but I hope you had a good discussion. So we're going to share this this chart and 2 other charts in the professional development resources. One is for thinking about where members of your faculty have strength in those principles and how you might be able to utilize those strengths to help strengthen them across your whole faculty. And then one is for madrachim or teaching assistants to think about what role they might be able to play in terms of beginning to think of themselves as learning guides as well. So we'll be sharing those, but we certainly didn't have time for those. But we do want to hear a little bit about your experience with thinking about these principles, especially if they're a new way of thinking about learning and leading in your classroom. So I invite everybody just to share a quick takeaway from your conversation in the chat. What is one takeaway from your conversation?
I'll share one thing, and it's not exactly to the question you're asking, but
Not enough.
in terms of breakout sessions, the way this was written and the questions given, it was a successful breakaway.
Okay, good. Happy to know that.
Yeah, a lot of times I go to these breakaways and they're like, what do they want from us? I don't know, so.
Okay, good, good. Okay, Janice, do you want to say more about that? I think that's, we had a similar reaction before in terms of just maybe all that's necessary in terms of preparing faculty.
I think that we felt, particularly after the COVID year, and our faculty did a great job of pivoting to Labriut, et cetera, but that there were members among us that we felt some of our members of our faculties just are not going to be able to, I'm going to date myself here, grok this very well without our essentially teaching them. And I was particularly, for example, thinking, oh, maybe what I'll do is take 3 or 4 professional development sessions before we try to begin teaching it. So someone in our group said, well, I'm thinking maybe I will look toward January to introduce it. And, I'd been so focused on September, January seemed brilliant. And then taking that slowly, bringing them into it.
Yeah, we're using 3+3 second semester in our school starting January to April. So anybody who's working on a second semester, I definitely want to talk to you. I think thinking about my faculty in many ways, it really is a very different way of thinking about learning and leading. Let's just talk briefly about each of the 4 principles to talk about just an idea for helping your faculty be a leader in this way. Thinking about inspiring creativity, what's one thing that you might be able to do to help your faculty be stronger in leading that way?
I've always found in general that modeling during my own professional development sessions, if I want to facilitate connection, if I want them to facilitate between students, then I help facilitate that in the meeting. If I want them to practice Tzimtzum, I try and do that in my meeting. And I'm incredibly transparent about it. And I say, this is what I'm doing and this is why. And here's how you here's how you can do it too. I have found that when I attend professional development, that has been successful for me. And so I've put that into practice in my school.
Great, great. Thank you. What about facilitating connections? Is there an idea specifically related to the principle of facilitating connections?
In terms of staff?
Yeah, yeah.
So I know at our school, we learn, I don't know exactly how, but maybe just from being around each other, we learn who has different strengths in different aspects. And like everyone knows, if they need an art project, they come to me. If they need a Hebrew writing, this one has the best handwriting. Like, you learn what's the best, who's the best with what. And also we get paired up with another teacher. Like, I was newer, so I got paired up with the kindergarten teacher, and she and I collaborate and share ideas. And we also like message each other. We share things, on email.
Great. I think the more that we can open up and encourage sharing among our faculty, the better it'll be for everybody. What about ideas for Team Zoom? And I will admit, this is what I'm struggling with. I have a faculty that is very accustomed to leading from the front.
I think that depends on what you're teaching. I think sometimes you need to be in front, and other times you need to be hands-on. I think there's some people, like I said, like people come to me for the art project. There's some people who have no clue what to do with, tissue paper or, whatever. So they wouldn't, it depends on your personality, I think, too. But sometimes then you can pair them with a different madrachim who might have that strength if they don't.
Great, great. Thank you. You will see that in some of the places how the curriculum is written, it specifically talks about the principle of Team Zoom and how to employ that within certain sessions. So that's simply a skill that takes lots of development. What about deepening Jewish learning? Any thoughts about deepening Jewish learning?
I want to back up
Esther.
to Team Zoom because I think the we're kind of assuming that there's going to be people to go to do what I call integrated arts, or to do, integrate into the curriculum the creativity, hands-on, including brain activities. And that's a whole nother, and by the way, there's a whole field of that.
Yeah.
I'm very involved in that. So right away, I'm thinking connectivity, I'm thinking connection. I mean, their names should be up, on the walls. They should be able to point to their name. They should have a name. Each person should have like a poster board with their name. So when they have a question, they can add it on. There has to be the permission to get up to be able to go, oh, I got an idea, and to go and do it if the teacher's comfortable with that. That there has to be time when the lesson in this one was earned name. How did you get the earned name? And there was no explanation of that. I mean, it was just, the process notes, but so I'm like going earned name. And then they brought in the scientist and went, okay, now I get it. He earned a name because of the profession he had. So again, these 3rd and 4th graders are like, what's their earned name? Paid in the ass child. Yeah. Okay. That would work. I'd put that one right down. But, or, a 4th child, whatever, my earned name. So again, that was a concept that was like, is a 3rd and 4th grader going to get this without more examples, without asking, do you even understand that term?
Yeah.
So, and then I was thinking, oh my gosh, asking kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? Is that how you get your earned name, or can you have one now? Right? The pain in the ass child, whatever. So, but, you can talk about doing role playing, and it's like, wow, that's again, creativity. A teacher, a lot of people aren't comfortable with that. At the same time, you hand a poster board and markers out, you'll get the teacher who goes, and that's why they're comfortable. And in this example, you had the parent who's come back to teaching. They don't have a teaching degree. Their love of wanting to impart Judaism is what's brought them there, which is great. And I think that's like a phenomenal place to start. But then what are the tools?
Right. So that's what we hope being able to model all of these pieces will do for them, and also the richness of this curriculum. But, you know, I would say this is one of those pieces of curriculum that is not something that you're going to hand to somebody. I mean, not that I think anybody here ever believes this, but we know that it is done. You know, you hand it to somebody 10 minutes before they walk into the classroom and they're going to read it and lead it. And this is for sure not that. And the experience that we're trying to create for the students is very removed from that as well, in terms of how intentionally all of the pieces are connected. So thank you, everybody. We want to run through, we want to make sure we have plenty of time for some next steps and questions at the end, but we want to run through just some more big questions that we think you might be thinking about. And again, Stacy's going to share a tool for thinking about these big questions to help you consider whether or not this 3+3 project is right for you and your school, and when you might want to use it. So there is this big question about when to use it. And if you saw in the If Not Now When website, it suggests that maybe people might start using it as early as the fall. That's really dependent on you, as I said, and I think Janice said also, we're thinking about using it in January. Think about where to use it, which grades is it appropriate in. We have found that the inquiry piece really doesn't work for our K1 and 2 kids. There's a place where we struggled with La Briute. So we are going to be using this for 3rd through 6th graders. Think about the stakeholders that will help this be successful, not just your faculty, but thinking about parents, thinking about your fellow staff members. Are there other lay leaders, perhaps committee members that can help you? What information do they need? How can they be allies in helping you to be successful? What about speaking to parents? What information do they need and when? And there was a comment about this last comment that Rabbi Schaefer made about working with families and ways to recognize the value of what we're teaching in terms of really helping families think about the gifting framework. And we've put out the gifting framework to our families already, but how to continue to reinforce that. Think really about, especially this last piece that we talked about, which faculty can assist you and how you can use their strengths. It's a great opportunity to elevate and recognize the strengths of your faculty. And we really want to know what questions you are thinking about. What other big questions do you have about the curriculum and material? And if you would share them in the chat with us, we will do our best to respond to them. We'll try to post responses in the Facebook group. So please share any other big questions that you have with us.
So while you're writing down these questions, because we all love multitasking, we want to just share a little bit about next steps, what you can look forward to, and to give you some ideas of things that'll happen down the road. As you know, we have a website which has everything posted to it. There were a number of questions, comments. Have you thought about sort of questions related to the curriculum? So we'll definitely take those into account and try to adapt things to make it user-friendly and to address those questions you raised. That information will be posted onto the website. We hope that people will use the Facebook group. There were a number of comments and questions about utilizing each other as resources, sharing ideas. So we want the Facebook group really to be a place where we can collaborate and help one another out. We're also open to the possibility nationally, I know there were some people who were interested in setting up a community of practice. We want that to be a little bit more organic. And I will let you know that in Cleveland, there's a small group of educators who've expressed interest in developing out some professional development. As Debbie mentioned earlier, there is a book that has a bunch of different resources and materials that you can utilize. And in addition to that, the Cleveland group is going to be working on different concepts and ideas. And as we pull things together, we will share them on the website as well. There were a few questions earlier, people asking about how to utilize this. There's 6 lessons. What if you want to build something out for the whole year? Or is this intended to be a small term project? Or what are the different ways we can use it? So we hope people will be really creative about it. We do not have a plan right now to build out additional lessons or lesson plan guide materials to supplement it. So I do encourage you to share, because we may be able through the sharing to develop some things out. I think there is room and flexibility to connect it to things you're already working on. And also we're hopeful that the lesson guide and also the framework documents will be helpful in working with lay leaders and conversations with stakeholders. So everything that's going to be worked on and implemented and added to will go onto the website, and we'll be sure to share those things in Facebook as well. Debbie, did
Stacy,
you? Yes.
I just want to make sure you saw that a request came in regarding the enduring understanding and creating a graphic or poster.
Yes.
That would be great.
Yes, I saw that. I wrote, it's on the list already. So I got that one down there too. And we only have a few more minutes, so I didn't know if there were any other questions that people had. I'm totally impressed. An hour and a half on Zoom. Amazing. In the summer. We want to thank everyone for joining us today. Please do not be shy. Ask us your questions. I've been working at the JEC for a whole week, almost 2 weeks now. So I think by the end of the week, I'll have more answers for you to a lot of your questions. We appreciate your partnership. And I want to give a big extra thank you to our planning team who worked on this: Nahama Moskowitz, Rana Fox, Erin Levine, Judy Schiller, Dr. Samantha Vinicor Meinrath, and of course, Debbie Niederman.